The night had all the trappings of a triumphant comeback. A sold-out crowd in Boston, a stage bathed in deep reds and blues, and Jane's Addiction finally playing together again. Dave Navarro leaned into a riff and let it howl. Perry Farrell strutted toward him, microphone in hand. Then, without warning, Farrell shoved his guitarist and threw a punch. The music fell apart. Crew members rushed on stage. Navarro, still regaining strength after months of illness, looked stunned. Fans who had waited years for this reunion watched as the band stormed off and the lights flickered out. The next day, Navarro, bassist Eric Avery, and drummer Stephen Perkins filed a $10 million lawsuit accusing Farrell of erratic behavior and assault. Farrell and his wife countersued, blaming his bandmates for provoking him. An alt-rock legend had collapsed under the weight of bruised egos and missed paydays. How did we get from stage dive to subpoenas? To answer that, we have to look at other times rock bands tore themselves apart in court. Jane's Addiction, Riot, and Reunion. On paper, Jane's Addiction's reunion was perfect. Their blend of glam and punk had shaped a generation, and promoters banked on nostalgia. Backstage, the mood was tense. In their lawsuit, Navarro and the rhythm section said Farrell skipped rehearsals, forgot lyrics, and treated them like hired hands. At the Boston show, those frustrations exploded. The punch wasn't just an accident, it was the culmination of months of resentment. When the tour collapsed, fans lost their tickets and a planned album vanished. The lawsuits captured the chaos in legal language. Erratic behavior, emotional distress, millions in damages. Farrell's countersuit portrayed him as the victim of a conspiracy. With both sides digging in, the band's story became less about music and more about depositions. As bizarre as it sounds, this wasn't the first time a beloved act imploded in a courtroom. Decades earlier, four lads from Liverpool did something similar, but for very different reasons. The Beatles, suing to survive. By early 1970, the Beatles' magic had faded. Creative differences were widening into personal rifts. Paul McCartney feared their manager Alan Klein was mismanaging the band's business. John Lennon, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr still trusted Klein. McCartney saw only one way out. He sued his own band to dissolve their partnership. In court, he argued that the only way to protect their music and finances was to break up. The judge agreed, appointing a receiver to untangle their affairs. Negotiations dragged on until all four signed the Beatles agreement in 1974. McCartney later said he had no choice. Suing was the only way to escape Klein's grip. The case shows how a lawsuit can be both an act of desperation and self-preservation. Unlike Jane's Addiction's fists and counterclaims, McCartney's suit was a calculated move to protect his art. But when family members become adversaries, the emotions are raw. Just ask the Gallaghers. Oasis, brothers at war. The chemistry between Liam and Noel Gallagher powered Oasis to global stardom. It also fueled endless fights. They argued over song credits, girlfriends, and backstage banter. In 2009, after a particularly vicious spat, Nolan walked out and the band dissolved. 2 years later, Nolan joked that a festival show had been canceled because Liam was hungover. Liam responded with a lawsuit. He said he'd had laryngitis, not a hangover, and wanted an apology. The suit wasn't about money, it was about pride. It was dropped when Nolan apologized, but the damage was done. The brothers didn't speak for years. As of 2025, they've announced a reunion, but many wonder how long it will last. Their courtroom squabble illustrates how sibling rivalry can turn into legal warfare. When brothers who wrote "Don't Look Back in Anger" can't forgive each other, it's clear that music alone isn't enough to keep a band together. And sometimes lawsuits aren't about family or pride, they're about being pushed out of the group and watching your friends carry on without you.
Fleetwood Mac, Fired and Furious. Fleetwood Mac's own romances and breakups were woven into their music, but they kept playing together for decades. In 2018, that finally ended for lead guitarist Lindsey Buckingham. After the band booked a 50-city tour, he asked for a 3-month delay so he could play some solo shows. According to his lawsuit, his bandmates responded by firing him. Buckingham claimed the tour would have earned him $12 to $14 million and accused the others of breaching their contract. He learned he'd been replaced by 2 new guitarists just days after performing with the band at Radio City Music Hall. The legal filing said his former friends had interfered with his relationship with concert promoters. A few months later, the parties settled, and Buckingham returned to solo work. No details were publicized, but the message was clear. Even after decades of hits and heartbreak, a band can still end with a lawsuit. That theme continued with Journey, whose members fought over something as mundane as a credit card. Journey, cards on the table. In 2022, Journey's guitarist Neil Schon sued keyboardist Jonathan Cain. Schon alleged Cain wouldn't let him use the band's American Express card, which paid for tour expenses. Cain countersued, claiming Schon was charging personal items. It read like a married couple's argument over who maxed out the account, except the couple was responsible for stadium anthems like Don't Stop Believin'. In 2024, a judge stepped in and appointed a custodian to oversee the band's finances, tasked with settling disputes between Schon and Cain. It's a far cry from rock and roll rebellion, but it underscores how business obligations can fracture long-running acts. And if you think that's strange, consider the duo whose soul-drenched hits are now tangled in legal arbitration. Hall & Oates, selling the soul. For decades, Daryl Hall and John Oates were inseparable partners who harmonized through every genre. In 2023, their relationship turned icy when Hall sued Oates to stop him from selling his stake in a joint venture. Hall argued that Oates' sale would violate their business agreement and jeopardize control of their catalog. A judge immediately blocked the sale, and the case is still unresolved. The duo hasn't announced any plans to tour. Fans are left hoping that their harmonies will outlast their lawyers. By the end of 2025, what looked like a simple business dispute may dictate whether they share a stage again. In each of these stories, from a punch thrown in Boston to a judge supervising the purchase of guitar strings, the lesson is the same. Creativity and friendship can thrive, but contracts and money often decide a band's fate. Notes from the courtroom. Rock and lawsuits are unlikely companions, yet they're intertwined. Jane's Addiction's implosion is the most recent example of how quickly art can give way to acrimony. Paul McCartney's decision to sue his own band shows that legal action sometimes protects the music more than it destroys it. The Gallaghers demonstrate that sibling love and hate can be argued before a judge. Lindsey Buckingham's firing highlights how a single scheduling conflict can end a decades-long partnership. Journey's feud over an Amex card and Hall & Oates' battle over a stake sale remind us that rock stars deal with spreadsheets as often as set lists. The music we love often comes from fragile alliances held together by contracts. When those contracts snap, the stories that emerge can be as dramatic as any song lyric. So the next time you cheer at a reunion show or hum along to a classic hit, remember that behind the melody, there might be a lawsuit waiting to be filed, and that the real miracle isn't just the song itself, but the fragile human relationships that make it possible.